Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Javli, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are coming to you from the beautiful and oh-so-sunny neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're delighted and honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Donna Galanti. She is joining us to celebrate her middle grade novel, Unicorn Island. Before we invite Donna into the studio, I want to take a minute to let you know about our Certified Great Read program. If you are a parent looking for a great book to add to your family library, you want to go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Certified Great Read Wall of Fame. There you will find books that our panel of teachers, parents, and kids found worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars. If you are an author and you are frustrated at how difficult it is to help your book stand out from the thousands, and I am not exaggerating, thousands of books that are published every single month, you will want to check out our Certified Great Read program too. The Great Read program, if your book is found worthy of those 4 or 5 stars by our panel, you get some fantastic promotional tools that will really help your book stand out from that crowd of books. You can find out more about it by going to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Really excited to welcome our guest today. She's coming to us from Eastern Pennsylvania, not too far away from Philadelphia, as I was told it was supposed to be pronounced the other day. She's here to celebrate a brand new middle grade novel called Unicorn Island. Please welcome to the show, Donna Galanti. Donna, how are you?
I'm fabulous today, and I'm even better being on your show now, Jed.
Oh, wow. We are really happy that you are here. You were hit by the ice storm last night, I'm imagining?
A little bit, yes. We've had so much snow this year, it's just crazy.
Well, it is, we need something to keep ourselves busy during this lockdown time and pandemic, and we just don't have enough to do.
I know, we can play in the snow now.
Well, if we're not outside playing in the snow, I guess a great way to spend our time would be reading Unicorn Island. Tell us all about this book, please.
Oh, absolutely. It's a really fun adventure read, fantasy set in the real world. And we have our main character, Sam, who lives in Brooklyn, New York with her mom, who's a traveling musician. But when her mom gets a job overseas, Sam has to go spend the summer with her Uncle Mitch in Foggy Harbor, South Carolina. She's never met him, never been down there, not happy about this. But she makes a new friend in Tuck, and they discover a hidden room with strange artifacts, and eventually a really unexpected adventure and legacy that is connected to her family beyond the fog on Unicorn Island.
Wow. I know it is very Brooklyn, New York is different than anywhere else in the world, but especially going from Brooklyn to a very rural area and with a relative, but it's a stranger. I'm having a hard time as a parent processing that in my mind, like sending my kid. There's lots of relatives that I haven't spoken to in years, that my kids never met. I never once dreamt about sending my kids to spend the summer with them.
Sure. And yeah, I mean, as a parent myself, I understand that anxiety and that fear. However, we learned in the book, too, that not everything or everyone quite is as what it seems, right, which can often be in our own lives. And I think kids can experience that. Sometimes we need to investigate more and learn more about people and places before we make assumptions. And so I think that's a really important lesson, too, that Sam learns in this book, and that it's good for kids to learn as well. And her Uncle Mitch turns out to be grumpy, but there's a very good reason why he is.
I am curious. I'd love to find out why he's grumpy. Hey, I want to talk more about Unicorn Island and your inspiration to write the book, but one of the things that we've never talked about here on the show, and I think this would be a good time to do it, is just what makes we hear this term middle grade novel a lot. what is a middle grade novel, and how is that different than a chapter book, than a young adult title, than something I'd pick up at my local Barnes & Noble if there was still one near me?
Sure, that's a great question, Jed. And so middle grade typically is for the age range 8 to 12. And I will say that Unicorn Island is for the younger middle grade age, towards that 8 to 9, 10-year-old range. And chapter books would even be younger, like say 6 to 8. So these are kind of for emerging readers who are starting to read independently on their own. Young adult is usually age 13 to 18. And what I love about middle grade in writing Unicorn Island is that it's that special sweet spot, I think, in a child's life, that 8 to 12 time frame where they have one foot in the magical part of childhood and they have their other foot heading towards into young adulthood where real life is waiting for them. And so there's still magic for them and possibilities, and their imagination can really take hold. And they also really live in the moment. Middle graders, more young adults, the teens, they're more reflective, maybe more self-absorbed, thinking about the future. But middle grade, that's being right in the moment with your friends, with your family, having adventures. And that's one of my favorite places to be, whether I'm reading it or writing it.
Yeah. It's neat as you were talking about that, and Donna and I both talked about doing school visits, both in person and online. One of the things that was always interesting for me is when I would travel to a K through 8 school, and the principal come in and goes, well, do you really want the older kids in the show? Because they're kind of obnoxious, and I don't know. They could ruin it for everybody. And I would just say, bring them all in. And it's amazing. You were talking about kids at that age, 12 years old. So we're talking 7th, 8th grade, maybe 6th grade. They do have their feet in both worlds. And one of the wonderful things that I love doing, one of the reasons I love having them come in and see my show when the kindergartners are right there with them, is that they very quickly lose that attitude that they have of being the, big people on campus, and they just become kids. And it's an amazing transfer. It's probably the most magical transformation that happens during my show. So I really appreciate that insight that, these kids are kind of straddling both worlds.
That's very true. And I've done school visits for 2nd grade to 7th grade. And I love the 7th graders as much as the 2nd graders. You have to kind of get on their side and know how to accept them and talk to them. And they're excited to be there and see you. You're like a rock star. They're maybe meeting an author for the first time. And so they lose their inhibitions, and it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. That is neat. Here in Boston, we had an author who wrote some classic ghost stories that were all based in New England. His name was Edward Rowe Snow. And I do remember meeting him at an author visit at our school. And it was amazing because it was, I had been in his mind in all of these books that I had read of his. And so meeting the author, meeting somebody who had entertained me on such an intimate level for so many hours is really, really cool.
It really is special for kids to have that. And I especially think nowadays that we can connect with them without so many boundaries, right? Mm-hmm. We have online, we have social media. And I have to say this past year for me, especially not just doing virtual school visits, but hearing from parents when Unicorn Island came out on the digital platform of Epic, which is in a leading digital library in many schools in North America, came out last May in a 5-part serial before the hardcover just came out. And I had parents contacting me, their kids who had been, so down, so depressed with the pandemic. They're at home. They're not seeing their friends. Maybe they're separated from their family. And this book brought joy to them just so they can have this adventure. They could escape with this character, Sam, that they connected with. And I did quite a few Zoom calls with young students, so that they could meet an author individually and from that. So that was a really wonderful one-on-one experience to have.
So who inspired the character of Sam?
Well, interesting. I had lunch with my publisher and he threw out to me, I want you to write a book about a girl who has to take care of a unicorn. That was it. That's all I got. And so I went with it from there. And Sam, she's so spunky and adventurous. I love her. There's actually a lot of me in her. She's an only child like I am. She doesn't know who all of her family is, like I didn't growing up because I'm adopted. So she's dealing with trying to find her identity and a sense of belonging, which is a theme that runs through the book. And I think that a lot of kids can connect with and kind of struggle with, like I did as a child. And so we have this here. She's trying to find a home. Of course, we kind of learn along the way that home is what you bring with you. Home is where you go. It's where you find that belonging. And that's what Sam does through this. She's very independent, almost to a fault. It's hard for her to let people in. And so that's something she has to learn to do in the book too. And I love creating her character arc, especially with her friend Tuck, because he is so different from her. He is much more cautious, scientific minded. She's a little bit rebellious. Let's rush forward without caution. And I think it's good for kids to see that they can have friends that are different from them, right? That we all bring our own strengths and skills to our friendships and our family. And that's a good thing, right? It shows us kind of a different perspective of the world.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I want to touch on this idea that you just said that struck me, that home is what you bring with you. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about discovering who you are and where you fit into the world and your family and your friendships and feeling secure and confident with that, I think. So you have your memories with you. Nobody can take that away. You have your special relationships you take with you, no matter how far you are from people. So they all become a part of you, your experiences, your family, your friendships, and you take that with you wherever you go. And that's part of your home and who you are.
That's really, really neat. As you're speaking, I've traveled all throughout the United States and down through Central America. And I know that while I might miss my kids and miss my wife when I'm on the road, especially if it's a long tour, I have a different view of it now than when I was younger. I don't, feel lonely when I'm on the road. And I'm thinking that that's part because I am bringing all this stuff with me. I'm not traveling around in a big RV motorhome, but I kind of got an RV in my mind with all my family and friends.
Yeah, I love that, right? You're on your own little adventure, taking them with you wherever you go. And I think that also ties into being comfortable with yourself and being your own friend, which, is something that kids can also struggle with and maybe not learn till they're older. But it also comes down to getting out of your comfort zone, getting into a whole new comfort zone, which is what Sam does in Unicorn Island, right? She has to go from Brooklyn to this coastal village in South Carolina. It's a very sleepy town. So she gets out of her comfort zone. But when we do that, we can have new adventures, new friendships, new experiences that add to who we are. And so we grow as a person that way.
I'm curious, as someone you shared with us that you were adopted, it's this time of this middle grade age is really tough for kids to kind of feel accepted, even if they're, with their both parents, biological parents, and siblings and extended family all around. It's really hard for kids to find themselves and to feel comfortable with themselves and feel as though they fit in and they belong. Was that, I'm not sure if you were aware that you were adopted at that age, but I'm curious, did that make it more challenging for you?
Yes, it really, really did. I always knew I was adopted. My parents were very open about that. They called me their chosen child, which I love. It made me feel special. I was selected. I was chosen. But I did struggle with it, especially becoming an adolescent. Who am I? Where do I belong? Nobody in my family, I don't look like anybody in my family, right? And at the time, none of my friends were adopted. Nobody else in my family was. So my perception was I did not belong, even though it certainly wasn't that, but that was my perception. And I had questions about my heritage and where I came from. And I did meet my biological mother later in life. So answers were given to me then, but it was hard. But I think going through that made me more independent and also understand really what identity is, and that family isn't just about blood. It's about love too, right? Mm-hmm. Love and loyalty. And I think that's what Sam also learns in Unicorn Island. And kind of tying into that, with writing about unicorns, there's a mythology there. And I love mythology. My other middle grade books have Greek mythology in them. And I think I'm drawn to that because there's so many stories and characters in mythology stories that have to do with universal truths that I think adolescents and young kids are dealing with, whether it's loss, friendship, belonging, that identity, grief even. So these are things that, everybody can relate to, and especially kids, because maybe they're going through some of these things for the first time and dealing with it for the first time.
Yeah. Before I go any further, I just want to take this opportunity anytime I have a chance to salute parents who choose to adopt kids, choose to become foster parents. I have to give them a salute because there are so many kids who are waiting for their forever home. So I am eternally grateful that your parents selected you and gave you your forever home. So if they're still with us, please give your folks a hug from me and tell them I love them and I appreciate their courage and their generosity. And I want to encourage anybody out there who's ever thought about it. We've had Dr. John DeGarmo on the show here. He's a foster care expert. He tells us that in any given day here in the United States, there are 400,000 kids in foster care. Just let that number sink in. 400,000 kids out there waiting for a forever home. And add that to all the kids around the world that are waiting for a forever home. And so if there's something inside you that's thinking, maybe I want it, go for it. Go for it. I have a feeling, Donna, that your parents never regretted a moment bringing you into their lives.
No, we went through the tough times as a teen and all of that growing up. Yeah, so I agree. And it's amazing to hear that number of how many kids in foster care. And I just want to tie something into that too, that if you're looking to help children and you can't foster or you can't adopt, Big Brothers Big Sisters is an amazing organization. I'm a big sister. I have a 10-year-old little sister. And the funny thing is going into that relationship, I thought I was going to be changing a little girl's life, helping to influence her. She changed my life. Mm-hmm. She opened me up to so much joy and to being in the moment and to being spontaneous. And it's truly been eye-opening for me as an adult, being in this relationship. So
really cool. I love how this book was inspired by a simple little conversation where a publisher just suggested to you that you write a story about a girl and a unicorn. And what a beautiful result that's come of it. I'm wondering, what kind of conversations do you think, because obviously Unicorn Island is going to be a book that's read by kids on their own, all around the world. The 12-year-olds are going to pick up the book in their library or on Epic and sit down and read this on their own. But we really encourage families to read together or co-read together. Especially, you mentioned Epic. There are all these great digital libraries out there where a family can sign up for an account, and it makes it really easy to co-read together. You don't have to buy 2 copies of the book. You can just, you go on your device, your kid goes on their device, and then you come together to talk about the book. What kind of conversations do you think families can have if they're experiencing Unicorn Island either together or co-reading and coming back together to talk about it?
Well, I think there's so many conversations they can have, related to some of the things we touched on, such as being separated from your family, maybe not knowing who all of your family is, trusting yourself to open up your mind in a new place, right? To be more open-minded, such as Sam going to this new strange place that she's never been to before, and opening yourself up to new experiences. So talking about what could those experiences be, and maybe even talking about what parts of your life could you turn into a story. Like, I've taken a lot of my own real life and fictionalized it through my books and through different themes. And so that's something that parents, grandparents, guardians can talk about with kids. What's your life? What's your journey? What's your adventure? What are stories that come from your life? And that gets them talking about experiences they've had and feelings that they might have had connected to these experiences. So, yeah, I think there's so many things to discuss, and also related to the illustrations, because this is a great book for reading aloud, right, with family together. The illustrator, Bethany Stancliffe, did an amazing job bringing the setting. It's very atmospheric to life. And I think the illustrations also can open up conversations between, families reading together. They're reading this and they're visualizing it. They're having this movie in their minds, and then they see the picture that can relate to what they're talking about, or add to it. They can add to that picture and add to that story.
Yeah. I'm wondering, Donna, is there a subject that you are really hoping your publisher sits down and says, hey, Donna, why don't you write a story about Bing?
Oh, yeah. I can tell you right now. Well, I love mythology, mythical characters, and King Arthur is one of my favorites. I've been reading everything about King Arthur since I was a young child, and I used to actually live in England, and I would make my parents take me to Tintagel, which was his legendary castle, and to all these other places in England that had a King Arthur feel. So if I could write a spin on the King Arthur story, I would love to do that.
That would be really, really fun. Is there something in particular about King Arthur that attracts you?
Actually, now that you're saying that, yes, because here is this young boy or girl, which I might, choose to write the story from that perspective, who really is alone, doesn't really belong anywhere. Again, it comes down to identity, right? He pulls this sword from this stone and he goes on this journey to find out who he is. And then he has sidekick characters like Merlin with him. I love characters who are like mentors or guardians or watchers. They can add so much rich element to a story.
Mm-hmm. Is there somebody in your life other than your parents that was your mentor that kind of helped guide you towards your career as a writer?
Well, it's interesting you say that. I've had English teachers in my life who really helped me pursue my writing. I have to say it was my mom. Mm-hmm. My mom, unfortunately, she got sick with cancer and passed away 12 years ago, but she was my biggest champion. She always knew I wanted to write books, and I've always been a writer, but I hadn't written a novel yet or a children's book. And after she passed away, I knew I had to make that dream come true. So she kind of left me that little legacy to say, here, take this gift, go do this, right? Because life is short and we need to follow our dreams. And I don't think I would be a novelist today if it hadn't been for her passing. So that's bittersweet.
Yeah. This has really been a really cool conversation. I'm wondering where people can go to learn more about you, learn more about your books, and especially learn more about Unicorn Island.
Sure. Just go right to my website. It's my name, DonnaGalanti.com, Galanti. I have a page there dedicated for Unicorn Island. There's a book trailer movie that's super fun to watch. There's also some downloadable activities, pennants, bookmarks, Create Your Own Unicorn Island Hideaway. That's really fun. And there's also some interviews with me on there. And of course, you can purchase the book at any bookseller that you choose.
Awesome. Yes. And we mentioned Barnes & Noble earlier. Of course, there's Amazon. But we really are encouraging people to support their local independent bookstores right now. A great way to do it is just to pick up the phone. It's really safe. Hey, local bookseller, do you have Unicorn Island by Donna Galanti? You don't? Do you think you can order it for me? Excellent. It can be there in 2 or 3 days, and it's a great way to support your local bookstore. It's also a really great way to support an author like Donna, because this might be the first time that bookseller hears Donna's name, and it's a great way to introduce them. And hopefully that bookseller will choose to put Donna's books on their shelf. Hey, Donna, I've had a great time talking to you about Unicorn Island, about middle grade and foster care and adoption and inspiration. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jed.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Ben Lancourt. He'll be here to celebrate Henry and the Gym Monster. It is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. You don't want to miss it. That's the next episode of the podcast. Hey, want to thank the folks who make today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Donna Galanti. Please be sure to check out Unicorn Island. Also want to thank my incredible team, starting with Alejandro Doherty, Fatima Khan, Alexia Brown, Hannah Pat Oboyski. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.